The 1920s were an age of dazzling optimism. America danced to jazz, factories roared, and Wall Street seemed unstoppable. The stock market became the heartbeat of the American dream, a place where fortunes grew overnight. Across the nation, ordinary people invested their savings, convinced that prosperity would last forever. But beneath the glitter, danger brewed. Speculation ran wild. People borrowed money to buy more stocks, chasing illusions of endless wealth. Newspapers hailed the rise of Wall Street as the triumph of capitalism. Yet in truth, the Wall Street crash 1929 was already being written in the frenzy of those years, a storm hidden behind the champagne and confetti of the Roaring Twenties. By 1928, Wall Street was a temple of wealth. Stock prices soared to record highs, and brokers promised that the boom would never end. Radios echoed with investment tips. Young clerks and farmers alike bought shares with borrowed money. It was a national obsession. The stock market crash 1929 seemed unthinkable. Politicians and businessmen assured Americans that the nation's prosperity was permanent. But the market was no longer tied to reality. Prices no longer reflected value. They reflected greed. The machine of profit spun faster than reason could control. The higher it climbed, the more fragile it became. Beneath the surface, America was building its future on credit and hope, a castle made of glass, waiting for one crack to bring it all down.
The summer of 1929 brought feverish excitement. Stocks doubled, then tripled. Newspapers glorified new millionaires, and investors flooded Wall Street. Margin loans, borrowing to buy more stocks, soared to dangerous levels. Banks, corporations, and ordinary families alike became gamblers. Few saw the danger, fewer cared. The illusion of endless wealth blinded the nation. Even as industrial output slowed and farm prices fell, optimism refused to die. The American economic collapse was forming quietly, like a fault line beneath the surface. By October, whispers of fear began spreading. Some bankers tried to calm the storm, but it was too late. The bubble had grown beyond control. All it needed was a spark.
October 24, 1929, Black Thursday. The market opened in chaos. Millions of shares were dumped as panic swept through the trading floor. Brokers shouted, phones rang non-stop, and prices plunged faster than anyone imagined. Outside the exchange, crowds gathered in disbelief. By noon, over 12 million shares had changed hands, a record. Leading bankers tried to stabilize the market by buying blue-chip stocks, briefly halting the fall. But the confidence that had fueled the decade was gone. The Wall Street crash 1929 had begun its deadly descent, and no one could stop it. The dream of endless wealth shattered in a single morning. October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday, the darkest day in Great Depression history. Over 16 million shares were sold in blind panic. Wealth vanished within hours. Banks, investors, and small savers alike were ruined. The stock ticker lagged hours behind. Clerks couldn't keep up with the flood of sales. Across America, silence replaced excitement. The stock market crash, 1929, became a national catastrophe. In New York, men wept on sidewalks, while others simply stared at the ground, broken. The age of optimism was over. The world's greatest economy had fallen into chaos.
In the weeks that followed, chaos rippled through the American economy. The Wall Street crash, 1929, had destroyed confidence overnight. People rushed to withdraw their savings, only to find banks closing their doors. Credit vanished. Businesses that once thrived on loans could no longer pay workers. Unemployment began to rise, slowly at first, then relentlessly. The dream of prosperity had turned into a nightmare. Newspapers printed stories of suicides, bankruptcies, and despair. America, once the land of opportunity, was gripped by fear. The U.S. financial crisis, 1930s, was not a single moment. It was the unraveling of an entire system built on faith and speculation. The crash had set off a chain reaction that no one could contain.
As winter arrived, the crisis deepened. Banks across the nation collapsed under the weight of unpaid loans. Thousands of institutions went bankrupt, taking people's life savings with them. Panic spread from Wall Street to small towns. Farmers, merchants, and teachers watched their money disappear. The government remained paralyzed, insisting that the market would fix itself. But the damage was done. America's economic heart had stopped beating. By the end of 1930, over 1,000 banks had failed. The Great Depression history began not just in financial charts, but in the faces of those who had lost everything. What had started as a market panic had become a nationwide collapse.
Behind every statistic lay a tragedy. Families were evicted from homes they could no longer afford. Soup kitchens appeared in city streets, feeding the hungry. Men who once wore suits now stood in bread lines. The American economic collapse tore through every class and community. Pride gave way to survival. Mothers skipped meals so their children could eat. Farmers burned crops they couldn't sell, while in cities, homeless camps, called Hoovervilles, rose from the dust. It was a new America, one marked by desperation and endurance. The crash had not only destroyed wealth, it had broken the nation's spirit.
The fall of Wall Street echoed across the globe. America's stock market crash, 1929, triggered economic panic in Europe and beyond. International trade collapsed as nations raised tariffs to protect themselves. Factories in Germany, Britain, and France closed, spreading unemployment and unrest. The prosperity of the 1920s had been built on fragile global connections, and now they unraveled. The world entered a decade of depression, paving the way for political extremism and conflict. From London to Berlin, leaders struggled to restore stability. The crash had changed not only America, but the course of world history.
President Herbert Hoover believed in self-reliance. He refused to let the government intervene directly, trusting that the economy would recover on its own. But as the U.S. financial crisis 1930s deepened, his optimism seemed cruelly out of touch. His policies failed to halt the collapse. Protesters marched in Washington. Veterans demanded pensions, and hunger spread unchecked. The people felt abandoned. Hoover's name became synonymous with hardship. Hoover blankets for newspapers used as covers. Hoovervilles for homeless camps. By 1932, faith in his leadership was gone. America needed change, and it would come with a new voice, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
The 1932 election became a turning point. Roosevelt's message was simple: hope, action, and reform. While Hoover defended failed policies, Roosevelt promised a new deal for the American people. He spoke to the suffering with compassion and confidence. His voice on the radio brought comfort to millions who had lost everything. The people voted overwhelmingly for change. When Roosevelt took office in March 1933, the nation was broken, but not beyond repair. The time had come to rebuild America from the ashes of the Great Depression and get America moving again.
Roosevelt's New Deal transformed the nation. Within weeks, he declared a bank holiday, stabilizing the system. New agencies like the CCC, WPA, and TVA created jobs and restored hope. Bridges, roads, and schools rose from the ruins. The American economic collapse began to slow, though recovery was painful and uneven. Roosevelt's fireside chats connected him directly to the people, reminding them that government could serve, not just rule. It was the dawn of a new relationship between citizens and the state, one born from crisis, sustained by faith. By 1934, small signs of recovery appeared. Banks reopened, factories began to hum again, and confidence cautiously returned. The U.S. financial crisis 1930s had not vanished, but its grip was weakening. Public works projects gave millions purpose and dignity. For the first time in years, paychecks replaced charity lines. Still, the wounds ran deep. Families scarred, fortunes lost, and trust broken. Roosevelt's New Deal did not restore the old America. It built a new one, more resilient, more compassionate, and aware of the fragility of prosperity. The spirit of survival began to outweigh despair.
Even amid hardship, art and music flourished. Jazz clubs, radio dramas, and Hollywood films became escapes from reality. Pain inspired creativity. The Great Depression history gave birth to some of America's most enduring culture: photographs of migrant families, songs of hope, and novels about struggle. People found meaning in endurance. The arts became the nation's heartbeat when its economy had none. Through creativity, Americans rediscovered unity, proving that even in ruin, beauty could survive. While cities struggled, the countryside faced its own catastrophe. In the Great Plains, poor farming practices and relentless drought created the Dust Bowl, massive storms of dust that buried farms and towns. Thousands of families abandoned their land, migrating west in search of survival. The American economic collapse had become both financial and environmental. These dust refugees became symbols of human endurance, carrying what little they owned in trucks and wagons, chasing a dream of renewal under California's sun. By the mid-1930s, America was transforming. The federal government took a larger role in daily life, regulating banks, protecting workers, and ensuring social security. The stock market crash 1929 had taught a painful lesson: unrestrained greed could destroy nations. Roosevelt's programs redefined capitalism itself. The American people had lost faith in the market, but not in democracy. The idea of shared responsibility became a cornerstone of recovery. From despair emerged reform, and from reform, stability. By 1937, production and wages had risen, but recovery was fragile. A new recession struck that year, testing Roosevelt's reforms. Still, America endured. Factories adapted, banks stabilized, and citizens worked with renewed discipline. The U.S. financial crisis, 1930s, had scarred a generation, but it also forged resilience. The lessons of greed, regulation, and unity would shape policy for decades. The storm had passed, but its echoes would guide future leaders through every challenge to come. The Wall Street crash, 1929, left scars deeper than any chart could show. It changed how Americans saw money, power, and government. Regulations like the Securities Act and the FDIC were born from its ashes, ensuring such chaos would never happen again. The era of unchecked speculation was over. The crash had humbled a nation intoxicated by its own success, teaching that progress must walk hand in hand with caution. History remembered those days as both tragedy and transformation.
Out of crisis, a stronger nation emerged. The people who endured the Great Depression, history rebuilt America with new ideals, fairness, accountability, and compassion. The dream of endless wealth was replaced by the pursuit of balance and security. When World War II loomed ahead, the lessons of the 1930s shaped America's resolve. From Wall Street's fall came a generation that understood both the price of greed and the power of unity. Today, the stock market crash 1929 remains one of history's most haunting warnings. It showed how fragile prosperity can be, how easily greed blinds judgment, and how swiftly confidence can collapse. Yet, it also revealed the resilience of a nation that refused to surrender. The Great Depression ended, but its lessons endure. Progress without prudence leads to ruin. Every boom carries its shadow, every rise its fall. America learned to rise again, not through speculation, but through perseverance, faith, and reform.